Good morning and welcome to this monthly meeting of the Cobb County Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is an advisory board that hears land use related matters. This morning we'll be considering zoning cases and land use permit cases. We are only an advisory board to the Board of Commissioners. We make recommendations. The Board of Commissioners has the final say and approval on all cases, and their hearing is 2 weeks from today. Before we get started with our agenda, I'm going to welcome up Pastor Jeff Giesman and with the Burnt Hickory Church of Christ, who will lead us in a prayer, and that will then be followed by a Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you.
Bow with me if you would. Gracious and Holy Father, we praise you and thank your name for all the blessings of life. And thank you for being with us. And I pray, Father, your blessings on these procedures this morning. Give everyone a good and calm spirit. Help everyone to seek to do good and the best for our community. Father, I also pray that you bless our community and our world as we undergo the difficulties and the challenges of the pandemic, of disputes and of racism and all the other challenges that we're facing. Help us to understand that you are love and you call us to be love, to forgive and to encourage and to be good people one with another. Again, Father, I pray your blessings on all that's done here. And through Jesus, I ask this prayer. Amen.
Okay, and now we'll have the Cobb County Police lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Peterson, our zoning division manager, to cover our procedures for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Board. Today's hearing will be conducted with in-person participation and virtual participation, and we will allow both at this hearing. I'd like to take a moment to explain how this meeting will work with both types of participation. As each case is presented, we would recognize those on site and those virtual in support and opposed to a specific case. For virtual attendees to support or oppose a case or indicate that you wish to speak on a case, please type in to the Q&A box the following commands. To support a zoning case, type in the following, and this is just an example. If the case number is Z123, you would type in SUP Z123 to support it, or SUP 123 to speak. If you want to oppose a case, you would punch in the case number and OPP. For example, it would be OPP Z123 to oppose a case. If you wish to oppose a case and also speak, you'd punch into the Q&A box OPP Z123 speak. Each speaker will be called by name. Your line will be unmuted. You will say your name, where you live, and that you affirm that you have been sworn in. For virtual attendees, you can view the meeting online or TV 23, but you must turn down the sound on your device. The virtual meeting is audio only. There are some changes that would have to be made to the hearing procedures to allow this participation, and I'm going to read those in right now. This meeting is live at 100 Cherokee Street, and we have applicants and participants virtually for this hearing. There are some members of the public which will participate virtually. We would ask the Planning Commission to amend their hearing procedures for today's hearing and for the rest of the hearings for the rest of the year to the following process. Number one, the PC staff and citizens will be allowed to participate in the meeting virtually. Number two, persons wishing to be counted as either in favor or opposed to a case will be recognized and the numbers of persons provided to the Planning Commission. Number three, persons who wish to speak virtually in favor or opposition to an application will identify themselves accordingly to staff for participation during the presentation of the application. And lastly, persons wishing to virtually speak will acknowledge and affirm that his or her testimony before the Planning Commission is under oath and affirmed to be truthful. Otherwise, all other hearing procedures would remain in effect for the rest of the year. So the staff would ask the Planning Commission to amend your hearing procedures to allow virtual participation from today's hearing through the hearings through the rest of the year.
Okay, thank you, John. Can I get a motion?
Make motion. Second.
Okay, all in favor? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. Today's hearing will be conducted with the following process and procedure. Each case will be called in numerical order. When each case is called, we would ask the applicant please stand and raise their hand so that they are counted for the record. Then we're going to call to see if there's anyone here opposed to a case, so they can be counted for the record also. We would ask those opposed to raise their hand and stand up so they can be counted. After recognizing the applicant and any opposition, the applicant and the opposition will be asked to come forward to be sworn in so they can present testimony to the Planning Commission. The applicant will testify first, and then the opposition, if any, will testify second. It's important to note that each side gets 10 minutes to state their case concerns. There is not a rebuttal process, so please convey all your information to the Planning Commission within your 10-minute time period. Additionally, if more than one person wishes to speak on a case, you may want to coordinate with each other about what you're going to talk about, because each side only gets 10 minutes, and you don't want to cover the same information twice. Then after both sides have had their 10-minute presentation period, the Planning Commission will start to discuss the case at hand. From the discussion, they may ask one or more persons to come back to the front for questions or comments. And after that, the board will make a decision to either approve, deny, hold, or continue the case at hand. Mr. Chairman and Board, there is one case on today's printed agenda which would like to withdraw their case. That's rezoning case Z28 of 2020, Trading LLC. The applicant would like to withdraw this case without prejudice, Mr. Chairman and Board.
Okay, and that's a case that I've been handling, and that's a case where we heard it last month and asked them to reduce the density, and they just weren't able to make the numbers work. The applicant's here and has asked me to do this, so I'll make a motion that we withdraw Z28 without prejudice.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, and before I read the continued held cases, there is one case that's on your continued agenda not to be heard, which is a mistake. Rezoning case Z33 of 2020, Flournoy Development Group LLC. This case will be heard today, so I'm not going to read that into the record. That was just an oversight by staff. Okay, the following cases will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z62 of 2019, Embry Development Company LLC. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z62 of 2019 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z76 of 2019, St. Benedict's Episcopal Day School Incorporated. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z76 of 2019 will not be heard today. Special land use permit number 17 of 2019, St. Benedict's Episcopal Day School Incorporated. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So SLUP 17 of 2019 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z13 of 2020, Arturo Martinez. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z13 of 2020 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z37 of 2020, Site Centers Corp. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z37 of 2020 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z38 of 2020, St. Benedict's Episcopal School. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z38 of 2020 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z39 of 2020, KO Management Incorporated. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z39 of 2020 will not be heard today. Rezoning case, land use permit case 12 of 2020, Jeffrey C. Smith. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So LUP 12 of 2020 will not be heard today. SLEP 4 of 2020, White Oak Longline Holdings LLC. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So SLEP 4 of 2020 will not be heard today. SLEP 6, St. Benedict's Episcopal School. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So SLEP 6 of 2020 will not be heard today. I would like to ask the people in today's audience, if you have a cell phone, please turn the volume on mute, because if the phone rings during the presentation, it does interrupt the broadcast. Any person wishing to speak before the Board of Commissioners must file a campaign contribution disclosure statement. If within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of a rezoning application, a campaign contribution totaling $250 more was made to a current member of the Board of Commissioners. Additional information about this announcement is located on the table in the back of this room. I want to remind applicants, opposition, or any interested party that information is due to this board the Wednesday prior to this hearing. Any information submitted after the Wednesday due date may or may not be considered by the board at their discretion. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to start the consent agenda.
Go ahead.
Cobb County Planning Commission zoning hearing consent agenda for July 7, 2020. LUP 13, Scott and Haley Waller, Felix Farms, request a temporary land use permit renewal for produce in land lot 532 of the 17th district. The property is located on the south side of Cooper Lake Road, east of Mayville Road. Staff recommends approval for 24 months, subject to the following conditions. Number one, site plan received by the zoning division on May 8, 2020, with the district commissioner approving minor modifications. Number two, no retail or wholesale customers at the property. And number three, Department of Transportation comments and recommendations. Is the applicant present? Is there anyone here opposed to LUP 13? Let the record show there's no one opposed. SLEP 7, the Quick Creek Companies, request a special land use permit for a concrete plant in land lot 13 of the 16th district. The property is located on the west side of Kent Road, north of Jamerson Road. Staff recommends approval, subject to the following conditions. Number one, site plan received by the zoning division on May 14, 2020, with the district commissioner approving minor modifications. Number two, fire department comments and recommendations. Number three, stormwater management division comments and recommendations. Number four, Department of Transportation comments and recommendations. Number five, no Sunday operation. Number six, Quick Creek will limit truck deliveries and operation to the hours of 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. And number seven, Quick Creek would not use the adjacent railroad line for delivery or drop off of materials. Should Quick Creek choose to seek to use the adjacent railroad line for delivery or drop off of materials in the future, Quick Creek agrees to limit the hours of the rail loading and drop off to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. And that completes the consent agenda, Mr. Chairman and Board.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any additions to the consent? Okay, Judy?
Slip 7, item 6.
I'd like to add that Quick Trip will limit truck deliveries and take out the word "in operations" to the hours of 5 to 7.
Okay, any other additions? Okay, do I hear a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. And with that, call the question. All in favor? Okay, motion carries 5-0.
Okay, all those folks that were on consent agenda, you're free to go. Just come back in 2 weeks for the Board of Commissioners hearing. And the first case we're going to hear today is rezoning case Z36, Greenhouse Properties of Atlanta, LLC. The applicant requests rezoning from RA5 to RA5 for their single-family residences in land lot 696 of the 17th district. The property is located on the south side of Lee Road, west of Atlanta Road. The applicant is present. Can I get a show of people here who are opposed to rezoning case Z36?
You know, I didn't bring it with me. I don't know.
Let the record show there are 9 people here in opposition. All those folks that wish to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in.
Do we have anybody online?
No, there's no one online.
Okay. And while we're waiting, I just want to take a minute to remind people that each side gets 10 minutes collectively. That's not per person, but it's for everybody who wants to speak on that side. So when you come up, be mindful, there's probably other people who want to speak, and keep your remarks to the point, and also try not to repeat what other people have already said so that we keep it moving along. Thank you. Please. Whenever you're ready, Purvis.
The bonds of freedom. Speaking of freedom, for the record, my name's Garv Sams. I'm with the law firm of Sams, Lark, and Huff, and here today representing Greenhouse Properties concerning this application for rezoning. And also, speaking of freedom, I noticed that one of the Planning Commission members is aptly festooned in colonial garb, and I commend him for that, and certainly was a good 4th of July, and appreciate that you bring the embodiment of that holiday here to this meeting. Again, I'm Garvis Sams, for the record. I represent Greenhouse Properties and have with me my clients today. The property at issue consists of a 0.63 acre tract of land, which is located on the south side of Lee Road, as you know, just west of Atlanta Road. Its address is 2068 Lee Road. We've got a composite that's getting ready to be shown. If I can work this clicker. Oh, the right, okay. There we go. And the reason I'm showing this composite, because it helps explain a little bit what's been going on over the past 5 years. If you look in, well, this is oriented north-south. If you look in your southwest, you can see the subject property that's outlined, and it also sits in direct contiguity and east of a property of which this 0.68 acre tract was a part when that property was rezoned 14 years ago in 2006. Unfortunately for the property owners, that deal never came to fruition. It was an RE5 subdivision. It was approved. The closings never occurred. The property never developed, and it's lain idle during that period of time. So since it didn't close, that left a multitude of lots that were zoned RA5. The original intent, of course, was for those to be a part of an assembled, cohesive subdivision. Since that time, though, my clients were not involved in that, but they were involved in 4 separate either rezonings or other business applications, including this one, which have taken place over the past 5 years. If you draw your attention to the northern side of Lee, going in your westerly direction, you can see the 2 applications that we had. One, of course, in 2018, along with other business, and the first one in 2016. I think it's important. Take it off. I think it's important for you to note in this case that your staff has recommended approval of this application, just as it recommended approval of the previous applications that Green Street has brought there on Lee Road. And as a courtesy to those that are here today, in order to better, for me and my client, to better assess their position and the opposition that they have today, we voluntarily continued the case from last month to this month, so that I could assess that and then try to differentiate their position from ours. But what's happened, back on, what's happened is either, I won't say a lack of understanding, but perhaps folks who are not bereft of history, but have maybe conveniently forgotten it for whatever reason. But this is a comparative analysis that I put together in order to draw a distinction between the application today, if any, and the other applications that we've approved on behalf of Greenhouse. And on June 22, I sent District Planning Commissioner, Mr. Waybright, this comparative analysis along with some other informative information, and made sure staff had a copy of that as well. And what it shows is, and if you look linearly across from one side to the other, that is from the west to the east or from the left to the right, you can see that the setbacks with what we have today and what has been approved in the past are not dissimilar. The overall square footage in terms of the size of the lots in question are not dissimilar. The minimum house size is the same throughout. That's 3,600 square feet and up. The frontage width is the same except for the original rezoning I did in 2016 where the lots were 55 feet in width as opposed to 50, which we have, well, actually 49.5 feet. So that's the only, and I would say striking dissimilarity, but it's certainly less than striking, a difference of 5 feet. The one glaring difference is that the application today just evolved naturally in terms of picking up where John Moore, who's owned the property 14 years ago, left off, and that is with the RA5 classification. So when we looked at the zonings from that period of time, and we looked at the two lots that we have that are isolated from that subdivision, since it never came to fruition in terms of an overall subdivision, we asked for a rezoning from RA5, conditional RA5, is a part of a subdivision to conditional RA5 is a part of two standalone but interrelated lots. The difference is that everything else that's been done, at least by me on behalf of Greenhouse, has been for the R12 classification. Now, turn off. In thinking back over the process that was involved in setting the policy by the Board of Commissioners, of course, we met extensively with Commissioner Ott during those 5 years, as well as the planning commissioners at the time, and the overall prevailing theme was utilizing the R12 classification. So I told the district planning commissioner in my letter of June 22nd that we are amenable to and willingly and expressly as a part of this process today are willing to delete our request for RA5 to R12, which is the more restrictive classification. We easily meet of course, it's a minimum 12,000 square feet. We easily meet those with two lots, one at 13,901, the other one at 13,881, actually approaching an R15 status as opposed to RA5 or R12. But we can agree to R12. So I'd like for you to keep that in consideration. Your district planning commissioner is aware of that, and that's something we can easily do. And that would be the last link in terms of that comparative analysis that you just saw, so that each one of those that we've done and the one we've got today are squarely on point with the other classifications that have been approved. On May 6th of this year, we submitted an overall stipulation letter which expresses and outlines the agreements to which Greenhouse is amenable. I trust that you have that, even though it's dated. It's over a month ago. It's over 2 months ago. Yeah. So, but hopefully you have that package of information before you. And what we're asking, of course, is the property be developed and rezoned to the R12 classification. We have, you can turn it back on. We have architecture that we've agreed to in terms of the architectural style and composition, very similar to the other homes in May Estates and others that the greenhouse has built within this area. You can see two-story, traditional, very neatly and meaningfully positioned accents in order to break up the architecture. And it's four-sided elevations or four-sided architecture, which means that all four sides are treated not identically but equally in terms of the composition of architectural components. All of the homes will have sodded and irrigated yards. There'll be a landscape plan that will be submitted during the plan review process. We've made our stipulations so that it's subject to the district commissioner's review and approval. There'll be rain garden infiltration in terms of stormwater management, which has been approved by the Stormwater Management Division. And we have noted that there is, in fact, a clear trend for development along Lee Road in this corridor. The folks here in opposition today have issues with my client based upon detention, contours, and other issues that are wholly and totally and completely unrelated to this. Their position is they want one lot, not two. The discussions I've had with several of them haven't led to them backing off of that position. We bought this based upon previous actions by the board and by you as a planning commission. My time is out. Simply ask that you follow your professional staff's recommendation for approval and follow the trend that's been set not only along Lee Road and unincorporated Cobb, but also what's happening in the city of Smyrna, and that you follow the policy that's been set by your Board of Commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
Okay, thank you, Garvis. And the time for support has run out, so we'll hear from the opposition now. Okay, and as you come up for opposition, please state your name for the record first.
My name is Chris Strong.
Okay, thank you, and go ahead.
Go ahead, you have my slide. Privately? PowerPoint, can you put that?
Is this you?
Yes. Chairman Porter, commission members, Attorney Sams, good morning. My name is Chris Strong. My husband Alan and I live at 2090 Lee Road, 2 houses to the east of the property under the rezoning application today. With me today are Rosemary Hardage and Linda and Jim Whitaker. We are the 5 immediate neighbors living on the east and west side of 2068 Lee Road, and perhaps most impacted by decisions that will be made today or in the coming weeks. Rosemary, Linda, Jim, Whitaker, Alan, and I are part of an 8-neighbor committee that has researched, held meetings, and discussed implications of the application and represent a large group who are opposed to Z36. 141 neighbors, including every homeowner on Lee Road, has signed our petition in opposition to the rezoning and lot split to build 2 houses on 2 grossly substandard sized lots at 2068 Lee Road. Next slide. 2068 Lee Road is one of 3 Lee Road properties. Rosemary's and Ellen and our houses are the other 2 that are zoned RA5. As Mr. Garvis-Sam said, they, along with a parcel of land to the south of us, were a proposed larger development that was abandoned in 2006. This rezoned RA5 district was site-specific and therefore no longer applies in this application. 3 years ago, Jim Chapman Communities developed the Boxwood of Vinings neighborhood outlined in orange, a true RA5 district with private roads and cul-de-sacs and access from Cooper Lake Road. Now, although the subject property, outlined in red, is indeed an RA5, it is isolated and stands alone on Lee Road because Rosemary, Alan, and I are in the process of applying to have our property returned to the original R20 classification. This will be a more accurate and truthful description of the land use and in conformance with the south side of Lee Road. The idea of applying to rezone 2068 Lee Road, an R12, is not a solution. Next. We would hate to see the unjustified exception made for this parcel of land. The lot is too narrow, and there is an unjustified nature to the benefit of the property owner, Greenhouse Properties, and therefore would undermine the pre-existing rights and uses the adjacent property owners of the adjacent property owners. It's an appearance of spot zoning. We believe Greenhouse Properties is requesting these variances and taking advantage of the RA5 zoning district. Greenhouse Properties wants to build two 3,600 square foot farmhouse-style homes on two substandard sized lots and indicate they are an extension of May Estates. These two houses do not constitute a development or any part of a development. The Cobb County Code of Ordinances clearly states the lot size and setback requirements pertaining to an RA5 district. Greenhouse Properties is asking too much. They are asking to reduce the lot width from 70 feet to 49.9 feet, to reduce the required road frontage from 70 feet to 49.9 feet, and also to reduce the required side yard from 20 feet to 5 feet, as well as a relief from the required 10-foot wide landscape buffer abutting the R20 to the west, which is the Whitaker's property, and then relief from the required 40-foot front yard setback to 25 feet. We maintain this is not a development, and therefore there should be no approval for this rezoning application. Next. Our committee has concerns about adding larger impervious surfaces, which will add to the flooding situation that has become worse in the last 3 years. It has created problems for the Boxwood community homeowners directly behind this lot. Next. We have researched comparable listings in the area and feel there is no developer hardship. One custom home can be built on this very generous buildable site of 7,900 square feet. This neighborhood can easily support a home in the range of $1 million. Recently, a tear-down lot at the west end of our block went under contract for $300,000, and plans are to build one custom home for a young family who lives nearby and loves the area. Next. This is the street view today. Rosemary Hardage has lived in her home on the left for 55 years. She and her family enjoy the many mature trees and park-like setting in her backyard. Linda and Jim Whitaker, on the right, purchased a tired 1960s bungalow about 8 years ago and completely renovated their house and garden and enjoy a spacious private setting. Next. We created a photo montage using the last two Greenhouse Properties homes built on the northwest end of Lee Road. The same design they proposed to build for this build site to give you an idea of how the infill for two houses would appear. Too big, out of place, out of character for the rest of Lee Road. Because this is what you see on the south side of Lee Road. Can you just kind of roll through them slowly? It is a collection of charming older homes and newer ones of varied sizes and architectural styles. A very different streetscape than the north side. This is the lot that I mentioned, is the tear-down lot that just sold for $300,000. And this is the final house on the west end that completes our block, the south side of Lee Road. Next. The northwest end of Lee Road, which is about half of the street, consists of 7 homes in the May Estates development. Originally, 5 houses were to be built and sold as an upscale development. Greenhouse Properties secured additional land under the Z25 2018 application to rezone to squeeze 2 more houses in for a total of 7, now giving the appearance of the Levittown project in New York. This row of 7 houses looks cookie cutter, and the May Estates homeowners have tremendous concerns that yet another 2 proposed for the south side of the road will diminish their property values significantly. Enough of a good thing. No more. So what do we want? We want 1 house built on this property to be R20 zoning compatible. We are asking for a minimum 20-foot side yard setback to be just like every other house on our side of the street, with a minimum 55-foot front yard setback, again, just like every other house on the street. We are asking for a height limitation of 25 feet to be compatible with the neighbors, and a lot coverage limit of 30% because of our concerns with the flooding. We want 1 driveway curb cut to be, to work with the house that will complement and not conflict with every other property on the south side of the road. And we are asking the developer to maintain as many trees as possible for privacy, shade, and erosion control. And we want written and enforceable agreement on the developer's plan, and we want access to remedies and penalties if the developer does not follow through on what is agreed upon. And we ask this because we understand the May Estate homeowners have had issues where promises have been made and not delivered. And finally, here is another view as we gathered on Lee Road a couple of weeks ago with masks on, thumbs down to oppose Z36. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a little over a minute left if somebody else would like to speak. Not hearing and seeing any, I'll close the public hearing portion. And it's back to this board, and Commissioner Tony Waybright is handling this case, so I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, both sides. Appreciate the presentation and outlining everything so clearly. Mr. Sams did provide the information and the suggestion of going to R12. The situation with R12 as an option is that it has the same 20-foot side setbacks as RA5. So that did not help resolve the situation with the side neighbors on adequate spacing between the homes. And absent some agreement from those neighbors to reduce the side setbacks, then as planning commission and as planning commissioner, we have to look, at least to me, beyond just what's on the paper. And Mr. Sams did point out that staff recommended approval, but as we go through the 3-step process of zoning, which is staff, then planning commissioner, and then board of commissioners, at each level there's additional subjectivity added to the review. There are great arguments on both sides for how this should be done. The applicant, Greenhouse, has been part of the development along the north side of Lee Road, and that's developed very nicely in the smaller lot sizes and the larger homes, be they R12 or RA5. With that said, it is pointed out that the south side of Lee Road has developed as R20. And those homes, each individual homeowner that comes in has been able to select an architectural style, either expand and renovate the existing home or tear down and build a new home of their design. So in trying to balance both of those issues and the development trends, my recommendation, subject to further discussion, my recommendation would be to delete the property to R20, subject to all of the restrictions, requirements, and codes that are contained in R20, but that the property owner should have the benefit of the freedom of R20, just as all of the other property owners on the south side of Lee Road have had. So no additional restrictions beyond the code and the standard development requirements. Is there any
that a
other
motion?
discussion? That's my motion then,
Okay.
if we're ready to go straight to the motion.
Okay, so the motion's to delete to R20. Do I have a second? Okay, second from Fred. Further discussion on it? I'll just add that I think in terms of the RA5, it was part of an assemblage And those stipulations of that assemblage can no longer be met. So the RA5 as it is doesn't really have a true meaning. It's not like it was just an individual lot that was zoned RA5. So I think Tony's probably right that the best thing to do is revert it back to what it was beforehand, since that assemblage isn't moving forward. And so I'll support the R20. So with that, any other comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Well, thank you, John. What's next?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Board, there was one case on today's agenda which it does need to be continued. Rezoning case Z33, Flournoy Development Group LLC. That case was on, there was a mistake with that case, Mr. Chairman, so we need to continue that case until your August hearing date.
Okay, and I think that's Tony's case. And Kevin wants to explain the continuance, that's fine.
Sure, this is actually generated from staff. I think there was in the printed agenda, it has it both being heard and being continued, and I understand from staff out front that there was a person who showed up this morning and was told it was being continued, and so they left, and staff approached me appropriately and asked me about it, and I agreed with their proposal that given that in order for due process and fairness to somebody who'd shown up, that it would be appropriate for that. So I'm fine with taking the direction of staff and this planning commission in that regard. We're ready to present, but if it needs to be next month for those reasons, then we can do that as well.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Do you want to make that motion, Tony?
Yes, we'll make the motion to continue this. Mr. Moore, thank you for your understanding and cooperation on that. I know we talked several times and exchanged multiple emails trying to get ready for today. But I do appreciate that, and we will continue working on this for next month.
Okay.
Motion to continue.
Mr. Chairman, can I please indicate that I'm recusing myself from any votes, even this vote on this matter?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Call the question. And that carries 4-0 with Fred abstaining or recusing.
Okay. Rezoning case Z7 of 2020, Seven Springs Development Company Incorporated, request a rezoning from R30 to RSL for the purpose of a senior living subdivision in land lot 586 of the 19th District. The property is located on the north side of Moon Road, west of Florence Road. The applicant is present. There is one person here virtually who's opposed and would like to speak. And is there anyone here in person who's opposed to this case? Okay. Let the record show there are 4 people here in person wishing to oppose. All those wishing to address the board, please come forward and be sworn in. And there is one person virtually.
Just letting them finish so they can pay attention.
Sure.
So. Oh, jeez. Okay, why don't we go ahead? Kevin?
Sure. Thank you very much, Planning Commission, this morning. I'm Kevin Moore here on behalf of Seven Springs Development in this rezoning application we're presenting to you today for your consideration for rezoning from R20 to RSL for purposes of an age-restricted senior living development. This case has been held a couple of times. We've heard it twice. This is the third hearing, public hearing of this. And I think it's really important, because at least I want to give credit to Seven Springs Development and the property owner, the Brumbelow family, and how they have worked together to address the instructions that have been received from, and direction, I guess I should say, from this planning commission during these public hearings, as well as in listening to the neighbors. For your recollection, this was initially submitted with a total of 62 homes for RSL at this location. We had been told to bring that down and reduce that density and do some additional work on the site plan, which was done. That was reduced to 55 homes, which was presented. Then we were instructed and directed to continue to reduce that density, and even a number was put out that it needed to be 46 or 47 homes, and that needed to be reviewed, and that's what was presented last month. Further from that, it was told, okay, we've looked at this and we continue to look at this and we continue to hear what some of the adjacent neighbors are saying and looking towards. We just want to continue to reduce that intensity and density and even the number that was thrown out at that point in time by the Planning Commission and by members of the community that spoke was to get this under 2.5 units per acre. It would be then considered low-density residential on the land use plan, even though RSL itself by ordinance states that it doesn't set a land use plan precedent, which would mean reducing this to 38, which is where we are today. So, and I want to I think it's important you don't see that level of drop almost in half, and it still survive. But I want to give credit to Seven Springs Development and the Brumbelow family for continuing to work together to try to make this happen, because both of them believe this is an appropriate development at this location of only 38 homes, but still residential senior living. So it is an age-restricted community, and with only 38 homes, it really, I think, does a stark comparison of what the impact would be for this proposed development versus if it was just developed as R20. And I think that that's really important, because the real impact becomes in a couple of different areas. One is highlighted on your screen. This is the site plan that shows a total of 38 homes. It shows the minimum buffer that has been placed here now and shown on the site plan, which is a 25-foot buffer that goes around the perimeter of this property. It reduces down a little bit around the Brumbelow family, but not much, because they're retaining those homes. The area is still there. In addition, we have a minimum 40-foot setback as well, and that will offer additional opportunity for landscaping and further buffering area. We also have areas at various points which are going to be largely left alone. You can see that just in terms of the overall site plan and where those occur, particularly the top left corner. There is a detention pond which will continue to actually get smaller now as the overall development area is being reduced. You can see that it feeds directly into likewise an existing pond that is there partly on our property, partly on the adjacent property, at least the buffer area of it is. So all of that area by ordinance and by stipulation will be landscaped around the detention pond, as well as there will be a mixture of undisturbed and landscaped area throughout that top left corner of your screen that you can see where the site plan references. And I think those are very important points to make, because when I compare that to what this would be under R20 is, you wouldn't see any of that. You wouldn't see a bit of it. There wouldn't be a buffer. All you would have is a required setback. That's it. And I think that's important, because we're at this point now where you're only a few houses more than what would be allowed under its current zoning of R20. And that's a real impact and a real distinction in my mind. In addition, there's a real impact and a real distinction in my mind, and on behalf of the Seven Springs, between just how this will feel as an adjacent community to these other adjacent homeowners. As a residential senior living community of this type, it will appeal to those in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's what we have seen. That's what Seven Springs, who has built similar types of communities in this overall area, in Powder Springs and other areas, has seen. And in terms of its overall impact, the in and out, the activity that occurs and so forth, it's less. It really is, if you live adjacent to it, it is just simply less. Yes, there are some rooftops, but again, the activity is wholly different and wholly less than what takes place in a more typical R20 subdivision. And there's real impacts as it relates to value and price point and sustainability of that price point and value going forward. This proposed community will have a higher price point and carry more value than homes in the surrounding area. And it will have a sustainability factor because of how it's arranged, because of how it's designed, and because it's specifically for a very targeted age group of residential senior living, age restricted, with full amenities that go along with simply 38 homes. What does that bring? Well, what it brings is sustainability as it relates to that value and as to that price point of the homes that will be here. And it provides a diversity in terms of the housing options in this area. Yes, there are other age-restricted communities in the overall broader area. There's some, but there's also a lot of and a ton of long-term established residential single-family neighborhoods in the area. And having that diversity of home ownership, having that diversity of housing options in the area is actually great for value, it's great for sustainability. It provides those options for people that live in that area, in that broader area, to stay in that area if they want to move down. It provides those options. It provides those options for people who want to move in this area and be near their children and their grandchildren. And it provides that continual option to continue to have viability, continue to have sustainability going forward. And those are important for an area overall as this continues to mature. At this point, we have, and Seven Springs Development has addressed each issue that has been brought to its attention. It has addressed those issues each and every time, and will continue to do so. If additional issues are brought to their attention, we'll be able to address them. I think that their track record is very good in that regard in this application. We're happy to answer questions. And again, at this point, this proposal at 2.4 units per acre is also now consistent with the staff's recommendation for approval at less than 2.5 units per acre. We respectfully request that the Planning Commission follow that staff recommendation and recommend approval of this application subject to our July 1 stipulation letter, which also sets forth the items that I described for you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Was there anybody else who wanted to speak in support of the application? Not seeing any, we'll go to opposition. Hello.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Linda Anita Bashirs, and I'm here in opposition to the development. I do appreciate Mr. Moore and the developer, Mr. Eddy, working to bring the number of houses down, but the concept of senior living just does not fit with our community. We all have property and, larger lots, and it is just sort of tucked in behind everything and is not compatible with what's already there. They did address a lot of the issues, but one of the main concerns is the runoff, the water and the flooding. I have a pond, and they are going to leave a natural buffer, and but the retention pond will be right on top of my little pond, and I'm concerned about the runoff. And there's a pond across the road on Ed's property. I can't think of Ed's last name right now, and we're concerned about what it will do to that pond there too. So the water issue has not been addressed at all. Of course, the same concerns every time, the traffic, the in and out into the new subdivision. And I'm sorry I'm not as eloquent as Mrs. Chris Strong was at the first one, but and we're concerned about the street lights being on 24/7, and there will be a lot of them. And this area is saturated with senior living. There's over 20 within 5 miles. I know it's what people want now, but there are other places that I think would be more appropriate. And the buffers seem better. We do appreciate that, but I still feel, and I think my neighbors, that single-family homes would be a better fit. We could still ask for buffers no matter what was put there, but I do think less homes on a little bit larger acres and single-family homes would be a much better fit for our little community. And we do need the tax money. I know it's not an issue, but everyone should be concerned about the schools. We need the tax dollars for our underperforming schools out that way. And if all we have are senior developments, it's going to get smaller and smaller base. And I think that's all the concerns we have. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Hearing and seeing none,
And there's one virtual.
Oh, we have a virtual, I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's a real impact for those people. In addition between just how this.
Go lay down. Go lay down.
And the lady speaking would be Melinda Paris. Go ahead.
Melinda Paris, I think he said.
That's what you've seen, that's what Seven Springs, who has built similar types of in this overall area, Powder Springs, and other areas.
Hello.
Melinda Paris, we have you unmuted and ready for you to speak. You'll need to turn down the sound on your television and speak through your device. Thank you. Just for the board, we are having difficulty with video through the web meeting today, so she is watching on television. I can tell from the sound. There is a delay from the video. So she does not recognize that she's been unmuted. We apologize for that.
Okay.
Because of how it's arranged, because of how it's designed, because it's specific.
Melinda Paris, can you hear us?
Residential senior living, age restricted, with full amenities to go along with Central 38 homes. What does that? So what it brings is sustainability as it relates to that value and that pricing of the homes that will be here. And it provides a diversity of housing options. Yes, there are.
Melinda Paris,
Overall, broader.
can you hear us?
There's some, but there's also a lot and a ton of long-term established residential single-family neighborhoods in the and having that diversity of home ownership, having that diversity of housing options.
Okay.
It's actually.
Melinda Paris, one last chance. Can you hear us?
Living in that area, that broader area.
I think with that, we'll have to.
Melinda Paris?
Yeah.
Can you speak, please? It's your time.
Tell her to turn it.
And turn your TV down, please.
Okay, it's off. Are we ready?
Must be hooked to that. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good morning. I'm excited about this. Not that I wanted a lot of new neighbors, but when she passed away, that would be something. She was very active in the community, lived here 100 years, and was a delightful person. But we knew something would come, and so we're excited that it's going to be senior living. I own property at 5410 Moon Road. It backs up to this property. I have a widow on one side. I have a widower on the other side. I'm 65. They're in their close to 80. So we're excited that the Seven Springs Company and the Brumbelow family has gone this route to protect the neighbors, because they're not moving away. They're still going to be the neighbors of this new community. So many times that I can point out some in the area, they sell the land and it goes to subdivision, but they move. They don't care what they left behind. But this family does care, because they're going to be their neighbors too. And now they're in their 80s. So this is exciting. Progress is exciting for Cobb County, and we're delighted that this would be the decision and the way to go. We're just very excited, and we want to thank you for this opportunity to speak. I only have one question, and I think I know. When a community is gated, that means they'll be responsible for their own streets. Is that right? And the county wouldn't even have to maintain their streets.
That
I
is
would like
correct.
some clarification on that. But Other than that, we're very excited that this is what the family has presented to the community, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll close the public portion of the hearing, and it's back to this board, and this is a case I'm handling, so I'll make some initial comments on it. One is, I do want to thank the applicant for working to reduce the density on down, as Mr. Moore said, going from 61 homes to now we're at 38 is a very substantial reduction. We normally don't see that. We had a case withdrawn earlier today because we had asked for a reduction in density last month, and the developer wasn't able to work and put all the numbers together with the property seller, because typically the property seller has to agree to a lower price when that density gets reduced. So that's one. One of the other things I want to make clear on this, and I don't think we really realized it until Friday, was this applicant seeking to build essentially zero lot line homes, meaning that a person will buy their home and the land under their home, but everything else will be common area. So that's why we see boxes drawn on the site plan versus our normal lot lines. And that led us to some confusion, and we had been asking for lot lines on the plan, and then getting boxes that we often see as footprints for houses, and not realizing that the developer was meaning that to be essentially the lot lines, although they may do a final as-built survey to do a final plat where they do it exactly to the footprint of the house. I wanted to go through, I think Kevin misspoke just slightly on the buffers. For most of the property, it's a 30-foot buffer, not a 25-foot buffer. And it's a 25-foot around the Brumbelow property, so they went with just a little bit less, but that's the sellers of this property. So if they're agreeable to it, that's fine. You know, the only other place I think a buffer is needed is along the entrance for the Foster property, and I'll cover that with the stipulation, just because their house is so close on the side to where that road will go in, and they deserve a little privacy as well there. I would like to ask Dave Braden to come up and address stormwater management issues, since that seems to be an ongoing concern, and if you can kind of cover what Cobb County requires and what your recommendations are, and you know, speak a little bit about the pre and post settlement and that.
Again, David Braden with the Stormwater Management Division. With the, I would want to say with the revised site plan, which we didn't have previously, the significant reduction in number of units, it appears that it's probably very close to, if not even with the impervious coverage limit that is under the underlying zoning, which is R30, which would be 35%. So I believe with the revised plan, there's probably not going to be significantly different stormwater impact from if it was just unzoned and it was developed as an R30 development.
Okay.
So wanted to mention that. But as far as stormwater management requirements, the county always requires that any development meet our current development standards, which is they have to provide stormwater management for the site that does not increase peak discharges off the site from the current undeveloped, naturally wooded site. So, and there are two basins. This site's, if you can back up, zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole site. Part of the site drains to the northwest, part of it drains to the south across Moon Road. So there are two different, and the plan does reflect two different stormwater management facilities. One thing that we do require when there are downstream existing lakes, particularly so close, is because there are county and state requirements for stormwater erosion control to mitigate any erosion that would sediment that would leave the site, but it does happen. So we are requiring a pre and post sediment survey be done on both of these existing lakes so that they will know what the condition of them before the development starts And then after they finish, if for some reason there is a failure of erosion control on the site and sediment does leave, then the developer will be required to remove that or mitigate that for those existing ponds. Those are reflected in my comments as well. See if there's anything else. Oh, and well, also because of those existing ponds, we are going to require an erosion control with community development. Will require additional erosion control measures on the site that would normally not be in place because of the downstream pond. So.
Okay, so you're confident that if this is developed, it's not going to lead to massive flooding or anything on the neighbor's property and those?
And they will, and as part of their hydrologic analysis, which will be done once the zoning gets approved, they will be required to do routings through those lakes to make sure that it doesn't impact their existing ponds as well. So.
Okay.
That would be required even if it wasn't coming through zoning, but.
Right, and these, just for the people out there, and you can confirm this, Dave, is over the years, Cobb County's changed ordinances to make things more restrictive and better protect neighboring properties. So maybe what occurred in a development built in the 1980s, because I know some people have concerns, have seen, oh, they built this and then we ended up with these problems. Cobb County's reacted to those issues and has changed the code over the years a number of times.
Correct.
To take care of those issues. So, we have great engineers. Dave's one of our engineers and he's the manager and he oversees it all. So I think you're in good hands as far as stormwater management. Is there any other questions for Dave? Okay, Fred's got one.
Mr. Braden, do you know what the current proposed impervious surface would be with the new reduction of lots? Because I see.
With the new plan, I do not know. And I don't think the plan actually shows it, but I think it would be wise to have them, they have time between now and the BOC to give us a number. I did not have a chance with the revised plan to see if I could compute it.
Because under the original plan, it was 61 units, less than 55% impervious, and presumptively, unless the size of the structures, the housing units has grown, then this would be significantly less.
Yeah, dropped from 61 to 38. Yeah, just looking at the plan, it does look, it's going to be really close to being 35 to 40%. So.
Okay, thank you.
That's very reasonable. Okay.
Okay. And I'd like to have DOT come up.
Amy Diaz, DOT.
Amy, thank you. Hey, I had a few questions for you regarding this revised site plan, and I didn't pre-warn you about these, so if you're not prepared, just say, you're not familiar with it. But one of the questions is kind of in the northeast corner, or almost not really the corner, but up in that area, there's a 6 parking space little parking lot. And I don't know if you can see that or if.
He's pulling it up for me.
Site plan
In the,
that has a couple little driveways right near the curve. It's on the inside of the curve.
you're talking about the one that's just as you first come into the development?
No, I'm talking up.
Oh, okay, yes, I see it.
Okay. And I don't think you've had a chance to see, but would that design, as far as the 2 entrances and where they're located, meet the public street standards if these were public streets?
No, they would not, especially being in the curve in that fashion.
Okay.
It is preferable than the perpendicular parking directly on the road, but it would not meet our current standards.
Okay, because they kind of did a parking lot here. If they took out one of the entrances and just had the one that's more on the straight, would that be too close to the intersection? Would you call that curve an intersection, and would it be too close, or would that be acceptable?
Given that it's a low-speed internal roadway, that would probably be acceptable. I'd have to check with traffic ops to make sure. But
Okay.
as long as they have sufficient sight distance at that intersection, nothing in the landscaping is blocking it, should be fine.
Okay. And then.
They will have to be able to turn around in that parking lot at that point, though.
Right, right. So they may have to reconfigure it slightly, but just possibly one entrance exit versus two. Moving, if you follow that street south, it kind of does a dead end into the detention pond area. Is that design acceptable to public street standards, or should they just curve the road around there?
I would like to consult with Stormwater before I said for sure, because I know that they also need access to the detention pond. But I would think, just based on DOT, we would rather them curb it and curve it around.
Okay, and they could always put a driveway from that to Stormwater, right?
Correct.
So that would probably be the more acceptable way. And then coming back up to the other amenity parking lot, which was near the entrance. And I kind of took a measure, and it appears to me it's less than 50 feet. You would want each of those entrances moved 50 feet away from that intersection if it was a public street, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do you see anything else on the plan that gives you concern?
No, they've removed all the perpendicular parking, the perpendicular parking that we had previously expressed some concern about. So, and since I do have it noted as private streets, of course, we recommend all streets meet our public standards, but they would be acceptable as private streets.
Okay. And I'll just note one more thing I forgot to mention. Up by the dog park, there's two parallel spaces that are closer than 50 feet to the intersection. You would want those pushed out a little bit?
By preference. Again, if there's sufficient sight distance, since that's internal and very low speed, it might be something that traffic ops could live with, but I have to check with them.
Okay. Okay, and you can check on these things between now and the Board of Commissioners meeting.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Amy? Okay, thank you. Back to, so I think we covered a couple. You know, one of the things with senior living is I know we saw two sets of people this morning, one who doesn't want senior living and one who's very excited about senior living. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's not really up to us to really decide that we have too many senior livings, we don't have enough or whatever. That's kind of the applicant coming forward. We hear the same kind of thing sometimes. You already have enough gas stations, we don't need another gas station, put one here, and it's kind of, we're in America and it's a free market. So we have to look and see, does this zoning fit our code and that? And one of the things they've done is their original plan of 61 homes actually fit our code as far as the number of homes being allowed. Now, there were a lot of other problems with the way it was laid out and that, so in some respects, it didn't fit our code either, but just on a sheer number. Now they've brought this down to, it's, I believe, 2.46 units per acre, so it's in the low density, which, as Mr. Moore said, is not required of the residential senior living because it's understood that there's less intensity than with the normal subdivision. For instance, traffic's usually about a third the traffic generated by a senior living unit versus a standard unit. So in terms of traffic, this development at this number of homes is probably less traffic than if they just went and built a subdivision at R30 in there right now, which is what it's currently zoned. And certainly less than it would be R20, which is the zoning of Autumn Run next door. So this is really, the intensity of this is more like our very low density versus even low density at this point with the lower numbers. So you know, I don't see how we can't say it doesn't fit. And that and there was one other issue I wanted to mention that we had gone back and forth on with Kevin, and that was the side setback they had requested 0. We had said we don't want to do 0 because we don't usually do 0. We don't want somebody building right on the property line, but this one's a little bit different with the 0 setback. You'll see there's common space between each of these building blocks. So if they build right to their property line in the building block, they're not really building right to somebody else's property line. That's to the common area HOA thing. So we can, Kevin had actually switched it to 5 feet, but I realized that would be a problem for them because if they have to stay within the building block and put 5 feet on each side, you're going to end up with a very narrow house. And they had allowed room, so I'll make a change for that. So with all of that, does anybody else have any comments before I make a motion? Okay. Well, I make a motion that we recommend approval of Z7, subject to all the following. All staff comments and recommendations not otherwise in conflict. The site plan received July 1st, 2020 with the following changes. The addition of the 25-foot landscape buffer along property owned by the Brumbelow with the exception of along the entrance. We saw it on there, but it wasn't actually on the site plan. It was drawn today. And then we need to add a buffer along the entrance road adjacent to the Foster property to be 15 feet wide from Moon Road right away to the end of the taper of the gate, and then going to 20 foot for the balance of the entrance road. The 2 parallel parking spaces by the dog park to be moved at least 50 feet from the intersection, and there's plenty of room to slide those down. The street dead end by lot 25 to be removed in the street curve to meet DOT public street requirements. And then move the entrance to the amenity approximately 10 feet to the east to allow at least 50 feet from the intersection, with a note that the clubhouse and bocce court may also be shifted an equal distance east. And then move the amenity entrance approximately 10 feet to the south, that would be the other amenity entrance, to provide at least 50 feet from the intersection. The 3 parking spaces may be shifted south up to 10 feet and may be shifted up to 10 feet into the 30-foot buffer because they're right up against the buffer right now, and 30 feet's much larger than required by code anyway. This 6-space parking lot by the pavilion to have one entrance closed, the one on the curb, and the other one to be brought up to DOT public street standards. And then sidewalks on both sides of the street throughout the community, which is in the STIP letter but not on the site plan. Ask them to show the impervious surface calculation on the site plan. And then the final site plan is indicated below. I'll get to that in a minute. Then we have all stipulations in the applicant's attorney's letter from Kevin Moore dated July 1st, 2020, not otherwise in conflict with the following change. Item number 6, change the minimum side setback to 0 feet. Okay, the community may have private streets, but all streets to be constructed to public standards. Community to be a 0 lot line community. Final plat to be based either on the approved site plan now or a as-built survey subject to approval of community development Community development shall ensure all homes, including any decks, patios, porches, or attachments, are within the rectangle lots drawn on the site plan for each lot with the following restrictions. Minimum of 15 feet between the sides of homes, minimum of 40 feet between the rear of homes, driveways a minimum of 22 feet from the edge of the sidewalk to the front of the home, and minimum of 20 feet from the potential 50-foot public street right-of-way to the home. And then the site plan to include the 50-foot potential public street right-of-way in case the streets are dedicated to the county in the future. All front elevations to have at least 50% brick or stacked stone. District Commissioner to approve all elevations. All garages to be used primarily for the parking of vehicles with only incidental storage that does not interfere with the parking of vehicles. This restriction to be included in the community covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and no sign variance. That's the motion. Do I have a second?
Oh, Lord, yes.
Okay, second from Judy. Any further discussion? Okay, call the question. All in favor? And that carries 5-0. Thank you. What's next, John?
Rezoning case Z29 of 2020, Toll Southeast LP Company Incorporated, request a rezoning from R20 to R15 OSC for a single-family residential subdivision in land lots 415 and 474 of the 19th District. The property is located on the south side of Macklin Road, west of Powder Springs Road. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to this case? Let the record show there's no one here in person opposing, and there's no one online virtually opposing either. Oh,
I guess
I
that
gotta show
brings it
people
back
here.
to this board.
I got to show people here who are in support of this application. Please raise your hand.
Okay.
You got this one. Yeah. Yeah. Look how good.
Okay. Let the record show there's two people here in support.
Thank you.
Two in support, and there was no opposed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, go ahead when you're ready, Kevin.
Great. Thanks for that. It's not often we get a lot of support, so I love to have it and call it out when I get it. Again, Kevin Moore here on behalf of Toll Brothers in this application for rezoning. Again, this was presented publicly last month for this R15 OSC proposal on Macklin Road. And we, as we said at the end of that hearing, we were going to work very diligently with our adjacent property owners and adjacent neighbors on the south side. And to help you, this is the proposed site plan, but up is west, not north. So please understand that. So Macklin Road is on the right-hand side of your screen. And so the southerly neighbors are the ones that we really worked with. There's 4 neighbors that we worked with that are along our southerly border, which is the left-hand side of your screen. A couple of things I really want to highlight with this, because I think Toll Brothers has done an excellent job with their design and an R15 OSC for this property, because it's ideally suited for R15 OSC. It's ideally suited for using the open space community concepts and applying them in this instance. I want to remind you of a couple of things. First, this stretch of Macklin Road, this is almost to the intersection, very busy intersection of Macklin Road and Powder Springs Road before it turns into Windy Mac, going to 75. So this property lies just outside the Community Activity Center as you proceed east on Macklin Road. And in fact, where this property is, it's adjacent to suburban condominiums that are over 5 units per acre as you move immediately into that Community Activity Center and the commercial uses. It's a great activity center. We've got a lot of great commercial uses there that are heavily used by the surrounding neighborhoods and area. So on this southerly side, or the south side of Macklin Road, from this point all the way to its intersection with Barrett Parkway is R15 and R15 OSC development, and approved developments that have done very well in utilizing those concepts. And so what we're proposing here is the same thing, and that's intentional. So that there's consistency in those zoning categories and in those communities as you come through this stretch of Macklin Road till you get to Barrett Parkway. As we have submitted this proposed property as a straight plan that is an R15 without utilizing the OSC concept guidelines and regulations, would be 106 homes. What we are proposing is 104 homes. So we've actually reduced that in using the OSC guidelines. The first question I asked Toll Brothers when we sat down was, just develop it, why don't we propose it as R15 then, instead of going to OSC? And get more lots. The response was that, in fact, with this proposal at 104 homes, with the amount of open space, the total amount of open space actually is almost 22 acres. There's 19 of it which is permanently preserved. The other portions of it are contained within the full amenity that will be here. But the reason is because of the value and price points and the style of subdivision that they can bring here. Doing this type of community and subdivision with the amount of open space that you can see on this site plan actually brings the value and the price point to it. It's what people are looking for. Some of the best subdivisions in Cobb County and West Cobb County and East Cobb County, South Cobb County and North Cobb County are PRDs, Planned Residential Developments, or OSCs. Some of the very best ones that we have had that have had the most long-lasting price points, livability, and quality are these types of developments, and that's what Toll Brothers plans to do here. The community will be fantastic from that standpoint, and our stipulation letter, I think, shows that both in terms of the house design that you see as well as the amenity packages that you see. But importantly, this site plan, I think, really embodies what OSC is all about. And I think they've done an excellent job with that. Now to a couple of the other portions of this that I want to get into. Number one, talking about the amenity, you can see the style and type of amenity that Toll Brothers plans to do here. This is a photograph from one of their other communities. And this will be the type and style. They actually do their amenities specific to their communities, to each and every community. They don't do a cookie cutter approach, but this is from a kind of a interpretation or impression standpoint, the type that you could expect here at a minimum to this level of high quality, though it'll be specifically designed for this subdivision. Next, you'll also see the types of homes that will be provided and built here by Toll Brothers. And again, they're a longtime company that produces high-quality homes and provides high-quality living for their homeowners and residents. And you can see that as reflected in these pictures. The variety and the quality and style of home will be outstanding for this subdivision. Also, I wanted to get to the next, that's the last one. Okay. If we'll go back to the site plan. Yep. Okay. What I wanted to get to is to really describe for you the agreements that we have done with the neighbors, and then save some time because one of them does want to speak with the four neighbors. What we were able to provide to them is an agreement to provide utility easements along that southern boundary that will enable those four owners to obtain and connect and provide that opportunity for connection to utilities that they do not have. In addition, we've provided a connection and a sewer easement so that ultimately they can potentially get to sewer. Also, we have provided a 10-foot undisturbed buffer along that boundary that will will be in place there. We've restricted the types and uses of fencing and restricted the types and uses of that area for their benefit. And lastly, also, you'll see in the stipulation letter that interestingly enough, what we have done is work with each homeowner, and Toll Brothers has, I haven't, to come up with an individual landscape plan for installation of additional landscaping on that homeowner's property. And that's what's reflected in that stipulation letter, that they really worked through that to do that. Their lots are very large lots because frankly, there's no water or sewer in there on their drive. And so we worked with them to do an individual landscape planning plan to add even more to their side. And I think through all of those efforts, each of those owners has agreed with that and now stands in support or non-objection to this rezoning request. So we respectfully request your recommendation of approval to the Board of Commissioners. The plan is recommended for approval by your planning and zoning staff, and I'll have the balance of the time for the gentleman who wants to speak in favor. I want to make sure he gets his opportunity as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
And while he's coming up, for the purposes of our record, we did have two stipulation letters, one on July 1, and then we did a supplemental letter yesterday of July 6, which updated an agreement with them. I just want to make sure the Planning Commission was aware of that. That was an update to the agreement with the neighbors. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Kevin, and thank you, committee members. My name is Bob Zakshevsky. Me and my wife, Carolyn Zakshevsky, we own 2002 Green Drive, which is one of those 4 properties that Kevin had mentioned on the southerly border there. And yeah, to be honest, we're going to miss all the trees and the nature back there, but given that this lot's destined to be developed, we're in support of this plan. We're very happy with the response and the support that Toll Brothers and their team has given us. They've met with us probably on about 5 or 6 different occasions to go over different aspects, and they've told us the areas where they could work with us, and they told us the areas that might be a little bit more difficult, and we were able to come up with some reasonable compromises that me and my other 3 neighbors have all agreed on. They've met with each of us as a group and each of us individually. The sewer easement and the utility easements will give us a little bit of connectivity, give us connectivity back in that area that we haven't had before and we've wanted, so that's a plus. They've worked with us to mitigate the impact of the changing from the natural area to the housing area with the undisturbed 10-foot buffer and then the landscaping. In addition to that, they're going to keep some trees probably going back anywhere from 20 to 40 feet along that border. That'll be up to the individual homeowners to keep, but at least it'll give them the option if they like the trees to keep them. So me and my other 3 neighbors are in support of this plan, and we'd like to we appreciate the effort that Toll Brothers has provided to us to work with us and provide a transition from what's there now to what's going to be there, and we're happy with what they've done.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else?
Thank you.
Well, I think we're pretty close out of time on support. So is there anybody who wanted to speak in opposition? Just to make sure. Not seeing and hearing any, we'll close the public portion of the hearing, and this is my case, so I'll lead the discussion. And first, I want to thank the applicant and Toll Brothers for working with the neighbors so diligently to address their concerns and work through that. So I'm glad we have that part of it, I think, pretty well resolved and nailed down. Now, unfortunately, they forgot to address all the other Planning Commission concerns from the last time, and that being the other neighbors who don't have a buffer along lots 36 through 38 and 59 through 66, plus a little bit of common area. And that's kind of the people in the northeast corner who didn't get any, and also some along the condominium project as well that don't have a buffer. So we need to get that taken care of. Another thing that they did is they made the changes. They forgot that the buffer that they put along the south has to be in common area by OSC code. So that needs to be taken out of the individual lots and put into common area. And somewhere along the line, they completely dropped the amenity off the plan. So we have no pool, clubhouse, parking lot. So we don't have enough guest parking on the plan either. And that, I would like to have a table so that we can verify the lot sizes, so a lot size table. Some of it, the site plan also had that they were requesting variances to a 15-foot front setback on 7 lots, and that's not something that I think is practical with the fact that you have to have a 20-foot driveway from the right-of-way and 22-foot from the sidewalk, and just not something I think we've ever given on an OSC, a 15-foot front setback. I can't recall one. Side setbacks of 7.5 are reasonable. Rear setbacks of 30, and they were showing, you know, that being to the neighbor's actual property line, not including the buffers, is below what's code required on some of them. It depends on what zoning they're going up against, how big the setback requirement is. I think if we do 30 feet from the buffer so that we put the buffers in common area, then 30 feet, that's reasonable. They'd also requested 10-foot setbacks on interior lots, and even our RAs have a 30-foot setback on interior lots, so I think 30 foot all the way around. Minimum 15 feet between houses, which with the 7.5 foot setbacks, we get that anyway, but it's good to mention. You know, we'd like to see at least 50% stacked stone on all the front elevations, and to stipulate that the garages will be used primarily for parking of vehicles so that they don't become storage and putting people out there. They also didn't update the entrance to conform with the DOT requirements of 2 separate lanes, one for as you exit the community, one for a left/straight and one for a right only. So we'd like to see that on the plan. Let's see, also like to see the landscape buffer, well, I guess it wasn't a buffer, landscape enhancement strip along Macklin Road be placed into common area versus being in easements on individual people's lots. And there's plenty of common area here to shift things around and do that. So with all of that, you know, I think it's ultimately a good plan, a good concept, you know, going from R20, which would allow 96 lots, to an R15 OSC, which allows 8 more lots, to 104. The trade-off of helping preserve those, you know, sensitive areas that OSC really does, and providing buffers to the neighbors that wouldn't have to be there with an R20 is a good trade-off, but I don't think this plan's ready to move forward yet because of how much is missing from it. Does anybody else have any comments before I make a motion?
A lot of the comments you made were good comments, but some of it seems to me that they could be addressed in the 2 weeks to the Board of Commissioners, unless you're just wanting to see what it would look like after you make your
Well,
call.
and part of them, a lot of those comments were identical to the comments I made a month ago, and they weren't addressed. So it doesn't give me much confidence they're going to get them addressed in 2 weeks if they didn't get them
But
addressed in a
as
month.
you said, it's a good project, though. It's a good
It's a good project.
You
I
have
just-
your neighbors here in support of it, which we don't see very
Right.
often.
No,
And I just think it's something that could be worked through.
Yeah, I
It
just
doesn't
think
seem
there's
like
so
me.
much missing off this plan with the buffers not in those certain places, and as well as the amenity totally disappeared off it, so we don't know where it will go. We don't have the calculation to make sure that the amenity's not taking up too much of, yeah, because amenity comes out of open space, so you have to have
Are
the
they removing the
35%.
amenity? Like,
I don't think that was intentional. I think it just ended up falling. It's still in the STIP letter, the amenity, but I just don't think they have a plan cleaned up, ready for us to send forward. And I've been asked generally to make sure that they're cleaned up and ready to go forward before we do. You saw in Z7 with a few minor changes, we went ahead and let it go forward. But this one, I just think they have a lot that they haven't fixed, and it's going to cause the shifting of all the lots with those buffers and things, so kind of where I am. Does anybody else have an opinion on that?
Yeah, just because I appreciate what you both had to say in terms of trying to balance those concerns, and I think you've done a fair job in both cases of balancing those concerns and where something can be, where minor changes can be made, but when the changes approach a level of significance or numerosity that you really need to see it again, I think you're proceeding in a prudent manner.
Okay. Further comments? Okay, with that, I'll make a motion that we hold this till our August hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I guess we'll give it to Tony. It was a tie. Any further discussion? No, with that, let's call the question. All in favor? Carries 5-0 to hold till August. Thank you. Okay, with that, we are going to take a 10-minute break, so we'll be back at 10:50. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Planning Commission meeting. John, what's next on our agenda?
Yes, sir. Rezoning case Z30 of 2020, Ralph S. El Mazari requests a rezoning from NRC and GC to NRC for a grocery store in land lots 189 and 190 of the 18th District. The property is located on the east side of Mapleton Parkway, north of Factory Shaw's Road. The applicant, is the applicant present?
Yes.
Let the record show the applicant's here. There is one person here opposed virtually, Mr. Chairman. Is there anyone here opposed in person to rezoning case Z30? Okay, there's no one here in person opposed. There is one person opposed virtually who would like to speak also, and the applicant is present. So I would like to ask all those folks wishing to speak today, please come forward to be sworn in.
I believe it does. I think so. Let's look. Actually, it doesn't. Yeah.
Okay, so there's two people opposed? Okay, Mr. Chairman, board. Mr. Chairman, there are now, Mr. Chairman, there are now two people opposed virtually.
Okay, two
So we'll hear them after the applicant's presentation.
Okay, go ahead and come on up, sir. Okay, and give us your name for the record.
My name is Raouf al-Masri.
Okay, and you'll have 10 minutes to tell us what you want us to know about what you're proposing and
Yes,
the application. So
it's
go ahead.
about Mr. Augustine. He like to have a supermarket in this area. He already have two lots in this area, and we like to have a rezoning to be approved for the supermarket first, and then I'm asking for variance for buffer of 20 foot. Instead to have a buffer of 20 foot, I need a buffer for 5 foot only. So, yeah.
Okay. What else do you want to tell us about it? You're going to make some improvements to the unpaved lot? You're going to pave it and put
We
in
will
parking?
pave it in, yes, we pave it in asphalt and concrete.
Okay. And you're
And
proposing?
we have one entrance for entrance and one exit.
Okay.
So it would be like one way.
Okay, so would the entrance be on Mapleton Parkway or is that the exit?
Yeah, Maple Parkway, the entrance,
Okay, entrance.
and the exit from the other side, yes.
On Community Drive, okay. And you're proposing to take the building that's approximately 3,000 square feet and put an addition to make it 10,000 square feet?
Yes, adding to the existing building right now.
Okay. Okay. Anything else you want to tell us? You have almost 8 minutes left to.
Well, I know that for this area, this kind of business, it will be good for the area there. I don't think it will impact the traffic. The traffic will be okay, and it will serve the community in this area.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell us?
Well, I have the owner with me here right now.
Okay, does he want to come up and say something, or?
Yes, sir, yeah.
Okay. Come up and that way, want to give you all your opportunity to tell us everything about it, so.
Well, and I don't think there's any opposition for this project.
We do have a couple people who are opposed. Go ahead and come on up. And give us your name for the record.
Is it morning? I'm not sure if you say good morning. Yeah, it is morning, right?
It is still morning.
Good morning. My name is Nayeli Benitez. My parents speak fluently Spanish, so I kind of interpret for everything. We bought this property in hopes of making it into a supermarket because my parents' dreams always have been having a supermarket. Aside of that, they already have a business, which is domestic and international money transfers, as well as a cowboy boot shop and rental home, so I believe all their funds would be coming out from there, apart from their savings. My father, he has already had experience with like businesses, so therefore I don't think it would really be much of an issue starting up the business, as well as we already have people on the side that are within like the meat market that already, since they're close family friends, they're like, okay, let me go work for you instead of who they're working with. The property right now, our engineer has all the drawings of the parking lots that would be on the downside on Community Drive. Basically, my parents just want to have like he said, an extension towards the back to be able to put a meat side as well with the vegetables. I believe there's already an oil grate. I'm not sure what it's called. There's already one in there just for anything on the side. Other than that, I think it would be a really good addition for the community, since we also know a lot of people around there and we are from the area. But other than that, if I could just hear the opposing sides to see what their opinions are and maybe answer their questions and their concerns that they have against the property.
Okay, are there anything else you'd like to add, either one of you?
No.
I hope this will improve the area and the service for this area.
I think
Okay.
the last meeting that there was before the whole pandemic started, they had made a note about the storefront. Right now, we just want to get everything like zoned and like permits passed, just to be able to do the extra construction in the back, and while doing the construction in the back, work on the storefront to make it look more presentable to the community and as well to the city.
Okay, and there's a whole set of design guidelines that would have to be met for properties on this road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we
make
hope
that.
to get those, to be able to overview them and do the changes.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay, if not, okay, go ahead and have a seat, and we'll hear from the opposition. They're calling in virtually.
All right, thank you.
There are two people in opposition virtually, and one would like to speak. Ms. Sonia Wheatley.
Okay, go ahead, Sonia.
Hello?
Go ahead, Sonia.
I'm still muted.
No, you're not. You're good.
Oh, wonderful. And I did send in a presentation. I don't know if that's up. It's hard to see here. So can you just confirm you have that?
The presentation is showing.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Sonia Wheatley, and I'm with the Neighborhood Improvement Coalition. Thank you first of all for doing this virtually. We appreciate the opportunity to still be able to participate. There are three main problems that we see with this application. While we're pleased that an applicant wants to go in and bring another business into the community, we have a hard time understanding how a grocery store could possibly fit on this property. The parcel is simply too small for a grocery store, and it doesn't allow for the proper buffering to residential. As I know you all know, the NRC district abutting residential is required to have a 20-foot buffer. The request to move to 5 is not appropriate and should not be imposed upon the residences, the neighbors living behind. I did hear mention of the Mapleton Parkway design guidelines. We see no indication that those have been considered or that it does meet these guidelines. But the main concern, the overarching concern for this property, is really the layout and how it relates to traffic, both pedestrian and to vehicular traffic. Looking at the plan, you'll see that there's commercial traffic that would be directed along a residential street being Community Drive. Its proximity to Factory Shoals and Mapleton Parkway makes it, a very dangerous and difficult entrance. In looking at how the trucks would come in, and I'll move forward. I'm going to make the statements and then go to the next slide. We don't know how delivery trucks, how garbage trucks, how any of the necessary vehicles for a business would be able to access the property. There's no clear plan for customers, how customers would park in the back and then interact and intersect the driving path and, again, the delivery and the trash area. They would have to cross, the main drive. And I'm going to see if I can go forward. Would you mind? There you go. So just as a comparison and to kind of help make some sense of this, I may have gone one. We're on the second. So I tried to kind of overlay, and forgive the crudeness, but that center diagram that kind of has a square shows the difficulty. There is an entrance that affronts Mapleton Parkway, and from the site plan that we received, trucks would have to either go in, make a hard right, make a hard left. I don't see how they would be able to drive through to the back. And then if you look at that little, being a semi or a smaller box truck, there's no diameter to make that turn to the right. How would they back up to the docks and deliver? Then to exit the property, they would go out and make another right. Basically driving over the curb is the only way I can see that happening. And then again to the left to make a hard right out of Community Drive. So there's going to be a lot of truck traffic that is somehow, and we can't quite work out how it would be backing up to deliver in the back of the building. Regardless, with the parking, most of it being in the back, we would have pedestrians crossing truck traffic, crossing incoming traffic with seemingly no way for their safety. And you can see that it's really because that little corner piece is missing and the odd kind of L shape. It's a very, very narrow entrance between the existing gas station and the existing building that they want to convert. So trucks would, I think I measured, and it's either 15 or 20 feet that people would be pulling in off of Mapleton Parkway and driving directly in between buildings. If you would go to the next slide. So I did a comparison just because I did think it was appropriate. Again, while we appreciate somebody wanting to bring a smaller grocery store, we do have a similar example with Aldi. That is it's a very small, I can't say I could measure their building, but it is a small building. And it's roughly on about the same size property, but you can see that it's really the layout that matters. If we look at Aldi, there's a 61-foot buffer to residential. If they exit and enter, or have the option to exit and enter at a signalized intersection, so they are not on, a small neighborhood drive. There is a clear separation of pedestrian and truck traffic. In the top right of the Aldi, you'll see that that's where their docks and their trash cans are, and all of that is not only buffered from residential, but additionally it's set aside so that you don't have the interaction of those two things, pedestrians and delivery trucks. Looking at the right at Z30, there's a request for a 5-foot buffer versus the 61. There is no signalized intersection. The business that they're proposing is located just down the road from Factory Shoals and Mapleton Parkway, which is a very busy intersection and about to get a lot busier, given that we have a school moving over there. That's really it. We certainly would have tried to think of a way that, we could, trying to imagine how this could possibly fit on this parcel. Unfortunately, we can't see a way that both protects the neighborhood road, provides safe access, and properly buffers against residential. So respectfully, we would request that you deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. And that was the only one who wanted to speak. So With that, I will close the public hearing of the public portion of this hearing, and it's back to this board, and this is one of my cases. If I could get Tim to zoom out a little bit so I can see the Factory Shoals intersection. You'll see where Factory Shoals comes into this road, and it's about one parcel away from the intersection of Community Drive. And with that, it makes for a very dangerous intersection. It's a dual left-hand turn lane from Factory Shoals onto Mapleton Parkway. And there's usually a good amount of traffic there. So when the light changes, obviously people start backing up on Mapleton Parkway, but there's traffic flowing from Factory Shoals to Mapleton Parkway. You know, probably 90% of the traffic turns left onto Mapleton Parkway from that intersection. So it makes it very dangerous to try and get out. I've used the Valero gas station, which is this little corner that this site wraps around. And I can say even at 10 o'clock at night, it can be dangerous trying to get out of that Valero and go left onto Mapleton Parkway. It's not ideal. So to put a lot of traffic coming onto Community Drive to come out at that intersection is concerning. So that's one concern I have with the property. Another concern is it's approximately a 3,000 square foot building now, and they're proposing to take it to 10,000 square foot. And with that, they need side setback variance as they go back. And the property just to the north of that also is a tight property. It doesn't have a side setback variance, but it's tight with everything on it as well. And it makes it really a packed design. But the bigger issue, I think, is what Sonia got to, is the one mixing of traffic. The main door for the store is right next to the loading docks on the plan. And people would have to be walking across the loading docks to get into the store. So that's of concern. Also, with the trucks trying to move within the site as it's laid out, and we don't have the site plan on the screen, but we can see it on our books. I don't even know how trucks would actually navigate through the way this is laid out. So that's another concern. The other is the desire to reduce the buffer to residential all the way down to 5 feet, which essentially means no buffer, because you really can't buffer in 5 feet. There's nothing you can do to provide a real buffer in that. So those neighbors in the residential wouldn't have that. And, you know, with the cases we've done, which was this site in 2017 and the site just north of it in 2018, we've been very intentional in making sure the buffers stayed in that. So those are a lot of the concerns I have with it. Does anybody else have any comments on it? Yeah, with that, I think a grocery store in this area, and there's shopping centers and that where it would be a good fit. I just don't think this is a good proposal for this site based on the layout and you know, it seems like we're just trying to put too much on a relatively small site, odd-shaped site. So with that, I'm going to make a motion that we recommend denial of Z30. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, second from Alice. Any further discussion? Okay, call the question. All in favor? That carries 5-0.
Okay, rezoning case Z32 of 2020, NGI Acquisitions LLC. request rezoning from RRC to RRC for multifamily dwelling units in land lot 1013 of the 17th District. The property is located on the southwest side of Cumberland Boulevard, north and east of Overton Park Drive, and northeast of I-75. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to rezoning case Z32? Mr. Chairman, there's no one here in person opposed, and there's no one virtually opposed to rezone case Z32.
Okay, good, thank you. What's that? Yes. Yeah, we're moving good. Whenever you're ready, Garvis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again. Good morning, once again. My name is Garvis Sands.
The law firm of Sams, Larkin and Huff, and I've got the pleasure of representing NGI Acquisitions LLC concerning this application for rezoning. NGI is a subsidiary of the Navarre Group, preeminent in their field of multifamily development, both urban and suburban. We've got our team members today, or I should say a modified version of our team members. I've got Mr. Evan Shaw, he'll raise his hand, from NGI here. Also, Ms. Amy Montagna, an engineer from Kimley Horn. You may have run into her from time to time, and certainly she is an expert with that firm. And then another expert that we have with us, a part of our team, is Mr. Jeff Smith with Niles Bolton, which again, luckily, we've been blessed with and surrounded by the best of the best. This represents a mere scintilla of the totality of our team, and it's taken a team, as some people say, a village. It's taken a team to really bring this to fruition in terms of all the moving parts. And you were kind enough, this was actually on your planning commission consent agenda last month, but we felt it was important to make some tweaks and modifications to our architecture and look at some other issues as well. So sometimes good things don't happen when you have the temerity to take something off of a consent agenda, but we did, and we think it was time well spent. We have no opposition to this. We had some interest that had been expressed. We spoke with the Powers Ferry, Corridor Lots, of course, and other area civic groups, both in Bindings and in and around the Cumberland Core and the CID. So we're not hiding, we're not flying under the radar. You really don't do that anymore, but I wanted you to know that we've been out there in touch with folks and satisfied any questions that may have been propounded or encountered. We have a piece of property that is 4.29 acres, as you can see shown in your monitors here. This is located on the east side of Overton Park Drive, which is a privately owned drive, and on the west side of Cumberland Boulevard, as you can see where it's positioned. And it's within the Cumberland Galleria Regional Activity Center. It's within the Cumberland Community Improvement District. It's within a sub-area of the Cumberland Core that represents a large percentage of the totality of the income and tax base that the county, or that is generated for the county. And what we are asking for within this sub-area is essentially to complete what's known as the Hines-Overton mixed-use development. This is the last piece that's left. In fact, I have an aerial photo that shows maybe, there you go, a little better, at least in terms of articulation of the positioning. You can see it begins on the north with office as a part of it, a hotel is a part of the Hines-Overton, residential, which is Overton Rise. By the way, I'm going north to south. And then the proposed residential we have today, which is a mixed residential between towns and Class A highly amenitized luxury units. And then you go further south to the office and then the hotel. So that's a piece of property, the totality of that, and this is the last piece of the puzzle left, that came before the board in March of 2018. And subsequent to that, in July of 2012, the residential immediately to our north was developed by Mr. Kraus and his group, Newport, and it's called Overton Rise. That was 4 years after the original entitlement. And of course, what we have concerns, the property that you see is the only undeveloped property that is left. The property itself, as shown in one of the original exhibits, is within a regional activity center. You can also see that we have direct adjacency to the national park. But everything outlined in red shows that this is a regional activity center within subsets or sub-areas that are denominated for the mixed-use development that you have before you today. This is going to be similar to Overton Rise, but in our discussions with the district planning commissioner at the very outset, he said, well, look, we realize that's a residential component, Overton Rise is. I want you to either meet or exceed the setbacks, the architecture, the landscaping. So we had from the very beginning a challenge, and rightfully so, from the district planning commissioner as to what he was looking for. What we did and what we submitted to both staff and to you individually and the district planning commissioner was a comparative analysis between Overton Rise, which Niles Bolton also was the architect on, and then our proposal. And on point, we meet in terms of the comparability between the two of those. I've submitted a revised stipulation letter on May the 12th, 2020. Since that time, quite recently, on June 26, 2020, after we asked that the case be continued, we improved, we think, upon the architectural renderings and elevations, or at least made them more clear as to what our intent was. And this is what you're going to be seeing if we can gain approval from you and the Board of Commissioners. Your staff has recommended approval. Your senior planner, I think, was the author of that recommendation. And these are the buildings that will house both the multifamily component, that is the Class A highly amenitized luxury apartment units, and then the 18 townhomes as well. So this imagery was recently submitted on June the 26th. We also have imagery that shows the courtyards in a more defined site plan. This, of course, is not the black and white site plan, but this is the conceptual site plan that gives you an idea of the interplay between the various components of this. And then, of course, architecturally, Niles Bolton has done an excellent job showing the buildings in relation to the structured parking that we've got as well, which is complementary to the balance of the aesthetics and architecture that you find in the Hines-Overton mixed-use development. While all this was going on, we submitted on May the 21st a complete traffic impact study, and then redefined and refocused that a few days later on May the 29th. So your DOT has had an opportunity to not only fully vet this, but to fully vet it in terms of having the best professionals in the business with Kimley Horn look at it. And I'll tell you, the imaginative effort that has gone in to doing a traffic impact study when COVID is here and when school is out has been interesting, but we've pleased, I think, and done what DOT has asked us to do. The Cumberland Core is a different area altogether. We view this proposal as a completion of an extraordinary mixed-use development. The breakdown between units, there'll be 9% studio units or 10, 151 bedroom units or 46%, 111 two-bedroom units, which is 34%. 16 three-bedroom units at 5%, and then 2-story townhomes on the terrace level and level 1, 6%. The market rent will be approximately $2 plus a square foot, ranging in price points in terms of rentals from the lowest being $1,375 to $3,000 and up. The height of the building, rather than fighting the topography and fighting the developmental issues that were there, and certainly there's probably a reason why this was the last piece, because it did have some developmental challenges. We've worked with the topo. This will have a swimming pool area, which will include a clubhouse and a lounge, fully equipped fitness center. Gates will control this, Knox box gates that your fire department and others have signed off on. Everything inside, you can see the interior appointments are phenomenal in terms of ensuring the price points that we've been talking about in terms of rental. There are 34 different components of that I won't get into the minutia of. We've ensured interior maneuverability. The parking deck works. The access points work all the way around this. There is no point of ingress and egress on Cumberland Parkway, but we have a decel lane with a mountable curve for fire apparatus to be able to get in and out of there with relative ease. I've got about 2 seconds left. Mr. Chairman, may I have 30 seconds in addition to that? I would appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will have to do an FAA study because of our proximity to Dobbins Air Force Base. As the crow flies, and it may not seem like we're within that, but we are. And we've talked with the manager of the airport, and Kimberly Horn has done a number of those, and we'll be doing this one as well. We are in a position to be able to comply with all the recommendations from the Stormwater Management Division, the Fire Marshal, the Water System, and others. And we're just asking that you approve this, subject to the District Commissioner reviewing the landscape plan, the final architecture if it goes beyond this, the final site plan if it's tweaked again, and that he be imbued with the typical latitude that a district commissioner would have to make modifications as this proceeds through plan review. So with that being said, I appreciate the extra time, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Wainwright. In the appropriate time, my clients, consultants, and I can respond to any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Garvis. And I believe there was no opposition, but I'll do it done. Anybody else want to speak in opposition? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close the public hearing portion of this, and it's back to this board, and we'll let Tony lead our discussion.
All right, thank you. Mr. Sams, you mentioned the airport report, if we can be redundant there a little bit. How long do you anticipate that taking to have completed?
That will be completed within 30 days of an entitlement of this. Kimberly Horn was also charged with the responsibility, as I recall, of doing the FAA report for the Thrisenkrupp building, which is nearby in the Battery, and so they're very used to dealing with these height issues in proximity to airports.
All right, thank you.
I mean, we could probably start and complete it between now and the next 2 weeks, but it just is more of a function of plan review. But we don't anticipate there being problems. It's really more a perfunctory thing, particularly considering our position.
All right, thank you. We also, after, I guess it's been a month ago, coming out of that particular plan review session, we talked about a parking study and having a parking study done to verify the adequacy of the parking provided. Could you comment on that?
Yes, sir. That has been done, has been internally circulated. We had the option of having either 1 or 2 points of ingress, egress in terms of that. I can submit that between now and the Board of Commissioners, and I apologize for not having that ready for you to look at. But we have adequate parking, and we are parked at a rate which empirically, in terms of multifamily developments or mixtures of residential development, we're parked right at 1.5 to 1.6, and we're finding now, because of rideshare systems and the circulator route, particularly in the Cumberland Galleria area, that the 1.75 per unit parking ratio is entirely too high. So we were able to reduce our impervious surface, and still provide ample parking for the development as well.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions for Mr. Sams? A couple of quick questions then. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dave Braden, Stormwater. If you would, sir.
Yes, sir. Dave Braden with the Stormwater Management Division.
Okay. This site has a stormwater detention facility, a pond.
Existing, that's correct.
Existing, and that served this and other sites?
And other sites off-site, that's correct.
Okay. And in the review, looking at the proposed underground storage, the capacity is sufficient for that plus the impervious surface that's been requested?
Yes, I believe so. Have had several meetings with the engineer, and they are, we're amenable to what they're proposing. They're relocating existing storage and providing additional storage for the current site. That's correct.
Okay, and we're good, and then downstream or down pipe from this, we're still okay?
Yes, they'll still be required to do a downstream analysis to make sure those existing pipes have capacity, but they should.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. DOT real quick also, Amy Diaz, please.
Amy Diaz, DOT.
Thanks. I know we had some questions about whether we needed a decel lane and whether the access point for the fire department for fire safety was okay off of Cumberland Parkway. Is that all squared away and we're good on those now?
Yes, unless fire has a requirement for the decel lane, we are not going to require it just for a fire access. And we have discussed with Kimley Horn their idea of a mountable curb, and what they're proposing is acceptable to us.
Okay, great. And following up on the need for the airport study, is that fine to do that as
Yes, it's part of plan review, but we included in our comments so that they know it's coming.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions for anybody?
Just very briefly, it just appears to me that the in and out for the parking garage is run off of the Overton Park Drive, which I would expect would alleviate the to a degree traffic concerns on traffic moving directly onto is that Cumberland Parkway there?
Yes.
I assume that was quite intentional. That was done in terms of providing some mitigation of those traffic concerns.
Yes, it was. As we worked through with the applicant and DOT, it provides the access because it's a private road between this application and the apartments above. And then it also goes directly up to Acres Mill, which is signalized, so they can access off of that too. So they have two different signalized access points.
I just appreciate that feature.
Let's see, real quick, Tim, if you could find the very first slide that we had up. We had the little blue dots showing the overall development along Overton. All right, thank you. So obviously, we had a zoning earlier this morning that, could be considered sort of an infill, and I think it's just always interesting what constitutes an infill development in different parts of the county. Looking at this and looking at the, what we have built already, we have 2 hotels, we have 2 office buildings. The hotel to the north is still under construction. The office building is completed and is in the midst of leasing up. We have residential. As noted, we have a circulator system that is starting to gain a little traction as other developments come along. Should certainly help. The question then becomes, what could go on this site other than what is proposed? And I think we see that in this particular area, the other potential uses have already been addressed. This seems to fit in nicely with the site, and I think as the elevations show, it's not an identical development, but would be complementary in the style and the design. So without anything further, any questions or other comments from fellow commissioners on this? Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion then. Would like to make a motion that we recommend approval of Z32, site plan specific to the site plan received by the zoning division on May 21st, with the district commissioner approving minor modifications. Variances as noted on the site plan, but specifically referencing that that instead of what is in our notebook, that the 10-foot setbacks have been increased to 25, except on the rear setback, which is the Overton side, which is 10 and matches the other buildings that face it, that border on Overton. Note specifically that the required parking is 569, and we agreed to the variance reducing to 517. Other design variances per the site plan. Letter of stipulations dated 5/12, May 12th, and updated again in May 21st. The revised renderings submitted 6/26, also attached here. Fire department comments and recommendations, stormwater comments and recommendations, water and sewer comments and recommendations, Department of Transportation comments and recommendations. And that would conclude. So that would be the motion to recommend.
Okay, we have a motion, second from Judy. Any further discussion?
No, I think this one will want to be heard one more time. I think. We know that the school system had filed a concern, but they were not here, so we'll see what happens between now and then, but we'll let it go.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, call to question. All those in favor? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Waybright.
I think that completes our zoning agenda, so we have a little bit of additional business with adoption of minutes. Can I get a motion for that? Turn on your
Make a motion to approve the special call meeting for June the 10th and June the 29th.
Okay, do I have a second? Second from Fred. All those in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Any further business? Without objection,
We're going to eat.
I will adjourn the meeting.
All right.